have Jennifer Temel, who is a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, and she's the director of cancer outcomes research and education at MGH Cancer Center, and the clinical director of thoracic oncology at MGH Cancer Center, and academic director of MGH Cancer, of the MGH Cancer Center. So you see, she runs lots and lots of teams and programs. She's received funding from the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Nursing Research, and PCORI and ACS. And she is she was the one who started that wonderful trend for early palliative care. And she has studied novel methods for improving care delivery with patients with cancer and their family members. We are joined by another fantastic researcher, Marie Bakitas, who is a professor and the Marie L. Okoran Endowed Chair, Interim Associate Dean for Research and Scholarship in the School of Nursing, and the co-director of the Center of Palliative Care at University of Alabama at Birmingham, School of Nursing and Department of Medicine, Division of Geriatrics, Gerontology, and Palliative Care. That is one sentence. For the last 30 years, she's been a member and now leads a large research team that focuses on developing and testing novel interventions, such as telehealth and teleconsultation to improve palliative care access and reduce disparities for patients with serious illness and their family caregivers, especially in rural and minority populations. Although her team's work originally focused on persons and veterans with cancer, she's expanded her work to provide palliative and supportive care for family caregivers and other populations, including heart failure, COPD, cystic fibrosis, and neonates and pediatrics. So she goes the wide spectrum. She's published over 150 original articles, book chapters, and books, and she's a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing and is an HPNA Palliative Care Nursing Fellow. So incredibly rich experiences from both of our panelists, and I can't wait to hear their advice on how to manage research teams. Thank you.
Thanks for that great introduction, Kat. Really appreciate it. And you know, when you present with Jennifer Temel, you have to be just as excited as she is. And so I modified my title to creating and managing the most excellent and efficient research teams in the universe, just so that I could compete with her. So true confessions, I have really done very little formal study on how to develop, manage, and lead teams. You know, and outside of the business world, though, I'm in the majority because few of us senior investigators have had formal training or mentorship in skills such as human resources, advocacy, team building, strategic planning, or budget management. Most of us actually arrived in our roles because of our academic productivity and seniority, and started careers as clinicians that were inspired to do research based on what we thought was really important. So in preparation for this lecture, I did a lot of reflection on the defining moments and mistakes that I've made through the years in managing teams. And then I listened to my team about what they thought was working and not working. And so you will hear a lot of that and just a little bit of the science. So I'd like to share some of the things that I've learned along this journey. And I'll share a couple of my mottos along the way. One of them I think my team really loves, and I really love too, that I think is an inspiration for this. If you're walking on thin ice, you may as well dance. And that is my motto for presenting a relatively non-research based personal journey on developing teams. So these are my objectives: to look at high functioning teams, to recall some experiences that have shaped my team building and leadership style, and think about the core values that our team has been functioning with. So I said this was going to be personal. I grew up in a very ethnically diverse neighborhood where immigrants came after they landed in Ellis Island to find freedom and build their lives. This is a picture of me with my first friend and my first teammate, Liana. Her family was first generation American from Italy, and mine was second generation from Czechoslovakia. And I lived upstairs and she lived downstairs in the same 4-family apartment. We were very different. She's the really girly looking one on the left, and I'm the tomboy. Her first language was Italian and mine was English, and we were inseparable. From morning till night, we played together, we got in trouble together, and I realize now that some of the qualities of our relationship are the most important ones today for teams, and that was immense trust in each other and transcending our differences. On the left is the picture of 1987 when I joined a member of clinical nurse specialists moving from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute up to Dartmouth. And it was an amazing group. I was the youngest of all. And we each had our specialties. Of course, mine was oncology. But our director of nursing research, which was a new position, encouraged us to come together to see if we could synergize and make a change in the hospital on one of the major problems, which was patient falls. We worked together on this research project and actually won the Sigma Theta Tau International Research Utilization Award. And this showed me how the power of putting the group interest before the individual is a really key component of team building. By 2011, I had spent almost 20 years being the clinical member of a research team studying pain and symptom management, led by my psychologist mentor, Tim Allis. Suddenly, Tim left to develop a new program at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I was left to learn how to lead a team. I admit, at first, I was pretty clueless. So what did I do? Well, I just tried to do what Tim did because I thought he ran an amazing team, and I remembered some of his lessons. Things like, the buck stops with me, and if things go well, I give the team the credit, and if they don't, I take the blame. You can only study what you can pay for, which is the importance, obviously, of maintaining funding, and always try to have a plan B. And lastly, and most importantly, it's always a good time to party. This is the picture shortly after I arrived at UAB, and my primary role models for creating and leading effective teams were Dr. Karen Manassis in the black dress in the front, which was then called the Center for Nursing Research, and this is the rest of the gang, some of whom are still part of the team. I'm now 1 month into my transition of assuming leadership of this team as the interim associate dean for research and scholarship. And I'm trying to remember all the important lessons that Karen shared with me as I try to continue the legacy of a dynamic service-oriented research team as she led them. And on the right, here I am with my partner in care, my work husband, I call him Dr. Rodney Tucker, who's been a continuous mentor of team building, emotional intelligence, and leadership. So it was from these early UAB mentors that I learned the importance of diversifying all of the talents and using all of the talents on the team. Lastly, before I get into a little bit more of our core values, I want to talk about moving to UAB. This was my first experience assembling a team that I had no idea who they were. You can see Dr. Nick Dion Odom there. He was a pre-doc at the time. And to this point, I had pretty much had people tell me who were the great folks to put on my research team. So shown on the left is Dr. Tasha Smith, who was new from North Carolina, knew nothing about UAB, and Imat Akyar, visiting faculty member from Turkey. And this is our team. That picture on the right, which was from the early days, is really not the best picture of me and Nick, but I picked it because I think the lights make it look like we both have halos over our heads, and that will probably never happen ever again. Somehow we got to be pretty successful. Up in the right-hand corner, I identified the best interventionists in the entire world and learned how to incorporate students. And my first postdoc, Dr. Deborah Ejim, on the bottom left, and on the right are PhD students. These were team members that I had had no experience in because there were no nursing schools, and we had an occasional medical student join our team, but really it was a whole new learning experience for me. Thank goodness I found the most amazing project manager, Sally Engler, in the whole world. And I'm sure that Dr. Temel will also agree that the project manager is the key glue and Velcro that keeps the team moving forward. So let me pause for just a moment to point out a paper from one of our colleagues, Dr. Abby Rosenberg, and her team that came up in JPSM lately. And the central premise of her paper on research teams was to talk about how emotionally challenging the work can be for members of the research team. And what she advised based on her experience was investing in both team and individual resilience resources to promote job satisfaction and facilitate program sustainability. I highly recommend any team member read this paper, and I don't intend for you to read her wonderful table 1, but I wanted to point out one role here, and that's the project manager, which, as we know, really manages and coordinates all of the projects and provides direct supervision to staff, including emotional support. And this is a really important reminder that even though staff may not have one-on-one experiences with patients, emotional distress and burnout are definitely issues that need to be considered in these non-interventionists or care providers. Abby and her team has selected core values, which are shown in the colors here, and they all begin with C. I started my presentation before I saw this, so all of my values begin with a T for terrific, creating 10 tips for creating tremendous teams. But these values are really important to identify, and the strategies in the white little hexagons that help to encourage resilience. She had actually developed a research retreat for her team, and I think it's a really good idea and something I'm definitely going to steal going forward. So the last thought I want to share before I get into the specific tips for truly terrific teams is what it takes for sustainability, especially in turbulent times. I'm sure many of you had heard the phrase, "It's not a sprint, but a marathon," signifying that the energy must be sustained over the long haul and not just short bursts of energy. However, to quote Barack Obama, when it comes to teams, it is neither a sprint nor a marathon, but rather a relay race. What this emphasizes is that both a sprint and a marathon are about individual efforts, but the talents and skills it takes to run a relay are very different. It's about the team, it's about timing, it's about handoffs. And when you take a look at this picture, the handoff, this is something that takes tremendous practice to go smoothly. Sometimes in the learning process, the baton gets dropped and you pick it up again and keep on going. In the second picture, though, I want to bring your attention, and if we were in a live audience, I'd say, you know, what do you notice about this picture? People notice a lot of different things, but the most important one is looking at the woman in the front. She is looking straight ahead. She has the ultimate trust that the baton is going to be there and that the girl in the back lets go and trust that her teammate has it well in hand. Trust is what team is all about and where I'm going to begin. These are my batons of the team effort and the core values of teams that I would like to share. If any one of these is dropped, then the team is at risk for dysfunction, disintegration, and loss of integrity. And many of the words that I'm going to share with you as examples are the ones that came from my team as we discussed what were the benefits and some of the challenges of being in a research team. I would say completely unanimously, the first one was trust, and the second one was transparency. And there really wasn't any way to separate the two. Trust is what we do. It's that we will do what we say we will do. It's a safe place to bring up conflict or difficult issues respectfully. And in the research world of soft money, transparency is key. There can be lots and lots of insecurity in the soft money world. People wondering and worrying if they're going to have a job. One area could be struggling, another one is exceeding. We have many deadlines, personal issues, emergencies that affect our work. And more recently, we've had many struggles with racial injustices. And on a very diverse team, this has been something that has affected us greatly. As in one meeting not too long ago, really everyone was hurting after the murders of George Floyd and others. And we had to decide that we were brave enough to speak up and to continue to have ongoing programs about racial injustices, that this was a safe space for us to be able to talk with each other and think about how can we incorporate these issues into our research role. Also, the staff felt safe enough to express concern about me taking on the new interim position that I mentioned earlier. So that felt good to me, that there was not just whispering behind the scenes, but actual expression of concerns. So what do you see when you look at this picture? Some of you might say, I see a very relaxed, happy, fulfilled, satisfied group of 25 of the top cardiologists, geriatrics, palliative care, nurses, physicians, and social workers in the country. Well, what I see when I look at this picture is team trust and transparency. You would never know that 5 days earlier, my partner, Mel, had a heart attack unexpectedly during a cardiac cath procedure. And needless to say, a lot of the last minute details and burden for getting everything organized fell to my new project manager, Kristen. And also my colleagues from New York City, Nate Goldstein and Laura Gelfman. In this case, the baton was passed seamlessly. They did the nighttime work on my front porch so I could be close to Mel. Dr. Tucker helped me find a caregiver to stay with him during the day. And it all looks like it was so uneventful. But let me tell you, it was a total exercise in team trust. Next is treating respectfully. This is the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for our team, these aren't just words or mandatory workshops that we go to. It's the recognition that everyone has something to contribute and that we're all fine just the way we are. When I think of this characteristic, I think of our recruitment and retention members of our team. They model and demonstrate the cultural humility needed to recruit patients and families, many of whom are basically distrustful of medicine and medical research, and for good reason. We're pretty much within a stone's throw of Tuskegee, where some of the most heinous experiments occurred against African-American prisoners. Yet this group uses the respect for culture to approach patients and let them know in this study they will be in good hands and ones that will treat them with great respect. Recently, in our heart failure palliative care trial, over 50% of the participants were African-American, even though the population of the cardiology panel is only about 20% African-American. The next one is talented individuals. Well, now this may seem obvious, but it's true that one size does not fit all. What works and motivates one member can be completely different for another, and we need to capitalize on each of the team's individuals' strengths. We're not identical widgets. Some of us like to present, some of us would rather be in the background, some are qualitative, some are quantitative, some thrive under pressures, while others are planners. I love to bring up the example of one of my pre-docs, Macy Stockdale, who always says like she's an introvert and she doesn't want to present, but whenever we want to look our best, that's what we do, is we bring out Macy and she just knocks it out of the park. And of course, we're all evolving, developing, and growing, and practical issues of research team is that we really all need to be teachers and mentors. It's everyone's job. It's non-competitive. We're all invested in each other succeeding, and the rising tide has to raise all boats. And whether it's practical, logistical, childcare, recipes, the best stats classes, books, or how to write better, we are all there to teach and mentor each other. In this photo, you see a handsome young Black man standing there. That's Dele Osasami. And he came to our team as a volunteer. And we loved him so much and thought he was so talented that we actually just hired him. Well, Dr. Deborah Ejim and Nick Dion Odom both were mentors, as well as Gulshan Bajivan, who was our Turkish faculty member who helped him with stats. Yet, Dele, was the mentor for Naisha, who's standing in the back, who was a new high school student that had joined our team. And so it just shows full circle how we need to go. This was just before Dele left. He had his poster accepted at the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine. And I don't think I look too very proud there, do I? Just before he went off to medical school, and he's doing great. And this picture is where I got a mentorship award. But what I want to show you here is this is the community of mentors. These are all the folks from my team, even though 5 of us got awards, that we were very well represented because we're always there to support each other. In this picture, who are all PhD students, the first 2 are BSN to PhD students. The next 2 on the right and the bottom 2 are actually faculty member. So they spend half of their time at least mentoring and teaching others while they're being mentored themselves. So it just shows you how all of these pieces are really important. I think this one is self-explanatory. It's called Talk Less. As a team leader, it's important to listen to all members of the team, especially the quieter ones who often bring the wisdom. And I'm sure many of your mothers or fathers said you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason. This is a word cloud of some of the things that the team told me when we were thinking about, what are the aspects of core values of the team. Someone who's also taught me to listen is Nick Dion Odom. When I came into one of my nurse coach meetings that he was supervising, he starts the meeting by saying, "What was the best part of your week?" and listens very carefully to see how everyone's doing. And finally, taking time to toast together, where we have so much critique, rejection from external forces, it's important to take time to celebrate, whether it's a graduation and going to medical school or winning the chili cook-off. And these are many pictures of our team celebrating, and there's always wonderful food and fun and games. Being tender is the next one, and I can develop, one of our members said, I can develop someone's writing skills, but it's hard to develop good hearts. And I think that's the most important, one of the most important qualities of the team, is that the members feel open, that it's a family environment, that there's a feeling of belonging, genuine, authentic, and a culture of generosity. I think we truly love each other, and love is a very deep emotional investment, but I can't expect my team members to have that emotional investment if I don't have one as well in them. Now, there's a lot of them and only one of me, and one might see this as kind of draining. However, I look at it as a generative thing. What I mean is that I invest in each of my team members, and they invest and put it back into other team members, and it comes back around to me manyfold. And here are some of the additional team members that have come from the love and cherishing of ourselves over time. And lastly, actualization, which is the highest level one can reach as an individual in Maslow's hierarchy. But the next level that he described was called transcendence. And this is the highest level that you can reach as a group. It's the raising of being concerned with the ends rather than the means, and for human beings to be in general with each other, in nature, and with the cosmos. And it's about a relationship and what the team is about. So to achieve the highest level of team, we need to ultimately transcend our differences and individuality and be part of a whole. Some teams never achieve this, but honestly, I feel this is the most effective that teams can be, is when they do transcend their differences. And in our case, what we're trying to accomplish, our common goal, is improving the quality of life and care for unserved, seriously ill persons and their families. So I'd like to turn it over to Jennifer and just close with the following quote: "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." And say thank you and acknowledge my team, which is now, this is what our team meetings all look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. That was fantastic. I love the pictures and the story, and I'm sure we're gonna get just as great information from her. Thank you.
I was going to say, so my big take-home points from Marie's discussion is many, but most important that I need to take more photos. And I realized by making fun of Nick's hair, I opened my team up to lots of ridicule, so feel free to bring it on. So I am going to talk about strategies and lessons learned from building our research program at MGH, which we call CORE. And those sort of strategies and lessons learned sort of fall into 4 categories. Number 1, be accepting. Number 2, sort of the effort it takes to build and foster a team, focusing on the importance of meetings, engaging and empowering your research staff, and supporting your colleagues. Number 3, knowing yourself and what's important to you. And number 4, being generous. So we're going to start with number 1, be accepting. And I know a few people on the call have heard me talk about this before. But when I was a junior faculty member, I was really struggling at the Cancer Center. There was really no one at my institution doing outcomes research. I don't even think they called it outcomes research back then. No one in oncology was interested in palliative and supportive care research. And I was really struggling because I just didn't have any mentors or colleagues. And one day I was probably crying at my desk, and there was a knock at my door, and I opened the door and Bill Pearl was standing there. And for those of you who know Bill, you'll know that this is actually how it happened. He said, "Hi, I'm Bill Pearl. I'm a psychiatrist, and I want to work with you." And I remember thinking, like, who is this? And how the heck could working with a psychiatrist help me build a supportive care research program? I had no idea sort of what his background would be and how it could be helpful. But I was in such despair and flailing that I said, all right, what do I have to lose? But sort of that decision to be open-minded, that a psychiatrist could be a research colleague, I didn't only have to work with oncologists or palliative care clinicians, was really the best decision that I have ever made. And I would not be where I was today if it hadn't been for Bill sort of teaching me what he knew and giving me a lot of education about how to build the program. And that door led to many other open doors, because working with a psychiatrist attracted psychologists to our group. And one of my other important colleagues, Joe Greer, has been a part of our research team now for almost 17 years. And adding a psychologist to our team really enabled us to develop much more rich and comprehensive interventions than we would have without that sort of behavioral therapy input. And again, by building our team in this way, we were able to grow our team with a large number of incredibly talented psychologists that all had different areas of expertise, like resiliency, qualitative research, caregivers, and has allowed us to expand our research base in many new ways. My story is really about mental health providers, psychiatrists, and psychologists. But I know in all of our fields, we see a lot of biases that I personally have experienced biases from some of my palliative care colleagues, because I am just an oncologist and not a palliative care clinician. And I know it goes both ways. I'm sure Marie has many stories about times where physicians weren't open to working with her because she is a nurse. So I think one of the most important things for us in this area of research is to really be open-minded about bringing in as many different types of clinicians and non-clinicians, researchers, onto your team as possible. So the second point is talking about sort of how to build and foster a team. And this is a picture of our team. We have about 50 members on our team now. And really, for the first decade or so, it really was just Bill, Joe, and I. And the question is, how did we go from 3 to 50? And I think this is probably the most important things for junior faculty to be thinking about, especially if they don't have leadership and mentorship in this area, is how do you get a critical mass together? And I know this is something people really struggle with, because I hear all day, every day, after people sort of see our team, they say, I can't even get 2 or 3 people in a room together. So how do you get that critical mass together? And I think the first point on this slide is critical, that you have to care about and invest in your colleagues and mentees, but colleagues' project as much as you care about your own. When your colleagues ask you to look at their manuscripts or look at their grant, you need to spend hours and hours and hours on it, because you absolutely have to view their success as your own, because that is necessary to build that environment and community and sort of sense of collaboration and support. I do think it's important to remember that not everybody could do this. Not everyone is sort of collaborative and can do this. I was recently involved in a situation where a junior faculty went to their mentor and said, hey, this other individual has asked me to be a co-I on their big grant. It's a SCORE, which in oncology is like a PO1, and I don't know if I should do it or not. What do I get out of it? And I stood there when the mentor said, you should say that you won't do it unless she promises you to be first author on the manuscript. And I would say that was about the worst mentoring advice I have ever seen, right? So if someone asks you to like help out and be involved in a project, the answer when you're trying to build a team is yes. And then you sort of figure out all those nuts and bolts later. So again, it's incredibly important to invest in others. An important part of this is taking time to have research meetings. And I think everyone right about now, like sends a deep sigh, like I'm so busy, I can't add another meeting. There's just no time for me to do this. But it's really important to bring together the individuals on your team, to have team meetings, to have project meetings. And I think Marie referred to this as well, you know, having your entire team. So for us, all of our research staff, all of our postdocs, all of our fellows, all of our program directors come together each week for an hour is incredibly important for us to have that sense of community and sense of teams. And I think, you know, as a leader, you have to foster an environment where you're going to sort of give and receive feedback in a way that is acceptable to people. With respect to the team meeting structure, I know there are a lot of people who have team meetings that they don't kind of have research coordinators or project managers come. And to Marie's point, your project manager makes or breaks your study. And so having all individuals working on your research team involved in meetings is very important. The way we structure our larger big team meeting is that we leave it very flexible. We don't sort of have people sign up months or years in advance. We want people to bring challenges, things that they're excited about, new things. We want them to have feedback on study ideas. If they're trying to put together a table or figure for manuscript, if they get a big talk at HPM for them to practice. And we always make sure that we leave time and space for clinical research coordinators and project managers to sort of share difficulties they're having with studies so that we can help them address it in real time. So again, I think it's really important to set up an environment where people are engaged and give feedback. Every single one of us has sat through a works in progress meeting where absolutely no feedback is given. That is a recipe for a meeting to end. No one is going to come to a meeting where they present new study ideas or things they're working on and they don't get feedback. But as you're building a team, and especially if you're playing a leadership role, it also is important for you as the leader to give feedback to your more junior faculty about how to give advice or suggestions. And that's something that's very important. So again, if someone's presenting, and again, you don't want to kill the culture of feedback, but if one of your junior faculty members is always delivering feedback in a way that feels aggressive or unsupportive, you need to take responsibility and give that faculty member feedback. As I mentioned, we found it's incredibly important to engage and empower our research coordinators and our team and project meetings. In our type of research, our research coordinators are always interacting with patients. For some studies, they're consenting them, and some studies they're collecting data, and they know what's working and isn't working. And not involving them in a research meeting doesn't give you the opportunity to sort of understand what's going right and wrong in your study protocol. Right now, I'm running a multi-site study at 19 sites around the country, and I can tell you, I know 100% when the research coordinator is not engaging with their PI, and those are the sites that are struggling. So you need to provide a forum and a voice for your research coordinators, depending on where they are in their life. Many of them are going on to medical school or graduate school, so it's important to provide mentorship opportunities and authorship for them. The last part of building and fostering a team is supporting your colleagues. And something that we have found really important at MGH is to have a forum where those of us who are sort of mid, or maybe my hair is getting grayer, late career, sort of come together for a half hour just to sort of have time together to seek guidance, support, and feedback, talk about what's going on in our life. And I think that's a really important part of kind of having resiliency as we're facing more and more challenges. I think another important aspect of building and fostering a team in our type of research is to really think about who is on your team. Make sure that everyone receives recognition with authorship. And for example, for me, I do a lot of palliative care interventions, which means I'm asking a lot of people to spend a lot of time seeing patients that they might not or might not otherwise see. So it's important that I am supporting those individuals and making them feel like they are getting something back for being part of the team. The third point is knowing yourself. And you might say, why is this an important part of building a team? And Marie got at this as well. But if you're not sort of happy and joyful with what you're doing, it's going to have a negative impact on your mentees, your colleagues, and your research staff. And a reminder that whether you're a clinician or not, we have chosen incredibly difficult careers as clinical investigators in which we face rejections, disappointments, and sadness. So as a leader and building a team, you really need to work towards feeling positive and happy about what you do. And sometimes that means making really difficult decisions and decisions that may not be decisions that other people will make. And so just to share two things that I have done, you know, for me as an oncologist, I love being an oncologist. It's one of the most enjoyable things that I do and how I enjoy spending my week. So even though many people that spend as much time doing research as I do, you know, stop seeing patients or only see patients intermittently, for me, it's been really important to be an oncologist and be a clinician. And so I've maintained a 2-day-a-week clinical practice despite how I've grown my research program. I think another challenge for us in research is the sort of soft money. And some of us have the opportunity to have more hard money positions that feel like a little bit of a security blanket. And I certainly felt that as well and was sort of on a track to be more involved in medical education and have leadership in that way, but really made the difficult decision to step down, even though it was sort of the easier route to pursue what I knew I loved and what was important to me. I think part of knowing yourself is also knowing your weakness. And again, anyone who knows me will laugh that I can't even really add 2 numbers in my head, literally. So certainly me helping my mentees write their statistics sections of their Ks is not going to be possible. But pretending that I could help them or not sort of building a team around me that could support my mentees and bringing in collaborators or educating myself. I've taken a few Harvard Catalyst courses where I'm pretty sure I'm 3 times older than anyone else in the class. But making sure that you have a team to support what you can't do. None of us are good at everything is also really important. And the last part of knowing yourself is having the self-efficacy and empowerment to advocate. I don't care where you are, whether it's at UAB or Duke or UCSF, any of these places that have incredibly successful and well-supported palliative and supportive care research programs, you know, at least in a cancer center, it's never the same as the pharma, the translational, the basic science research. So we have to advocate. We have to secure a seat at the table. We need to educate our leadership about what we do. We need to help them message how to talk about cancer therapies and palliative and supportive care at the same time. And my biggest pet peeve is even when I'm on the agenda, I'm always last. Marie is nodding her head. Palliative and supportive care is always last, and you need to advocate so that you're first, at least every once in a while. And then my fourth point is the most important part of building a successful research program. Marie spent a ton of time on this, but it's of course being generous. And the generosity needs to start with your trainees and junior faculty as a mentor. Mentoring is a critical element of expanding the research efforts in palliative and supportive care. You need to meet with your mentees. I meet with my mentees every single week. I'm always sending them kind of RFAs that came out, or when I get the emails from PCRC about talks that are upcoming. So you really need to invest on making sure that they know about all of the education and training opportunities. You need to read their grants, you need to read their manuscripts, and we need to be there to support them when they're dealing with rejections. I know that in 2020, this all gets a little dicey when we're thinking about different genders and sexuality, but I feel very strongly that as a mentor, we need to provide mentorship on personal life, on family. We're not supposed to call it work-life balance anymore, but I'm old, so that's what I'm gonna call it. But we have to be checking in with our mentees about how they're doing in their personal life, their relationships, and their families. If because of gender or any other issues, you can't be the one to do that with a mentee, then you need to find someone who can. And that's especially important right now during COVID, where individuals, no matter what their sexuality and gender is, who have young children at home are really struggling right now. And we also need to be generous with our community. That means even though, you know, those manuscript review requests usually come in at a terrible time, no matter what, you need to agree to review the manuscripts, because we've all had manuscripts reviewed by people who weren't qualified to do it. And that's because one of us said no to do it. So you need to review manuscripts. You need to serve on grant review committees. Again, this is such an important step to growing and expanding the research portfolio. When a colleague in the field asks for help for either themselves or a mentee, the answer is always yes. Every time I've emailed Marie, the answer is always yes, and vice versa. Marie talked about the importance of awards. Nominate your colleagues, your mentees for awards. It's really important. It's important for their self-esteem, and frankly, it's important for promotion, which can be a little trickier for us than our colleagues who do more basic or translational research. And this is just a slide to thank people in the community who have been generous to me. And Marie and I wanted to end and leave 15 to 20 minutes for questions, so we did it.
Thanks, you two. I'll let you go ahead or Naomi, are you going to moderate this part?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Temel, Dr. Bakitas. I found your talk extremely motivating and inspiring. I see a couple of questions have already come in. Let's see. In building a research team and in being accepting, how do you balance keeping a focus on one or two research areas versus taking everyone's ideas on and getting spread thin?
We can both probably contribute to that. I don't think we have to completely take on a research idea. I think that, I think, my team has a lot of different foci. And so we're all sort of joined by this one umbrella called palliative care for, underserved populations. And so, for example, anything to do with caregivers goes to Nick's bailiwick, and anything to do with spirituality and, goes to Dr. Deb Ejim's bailiwick. And so heart failures, so I think that it's a matter of trying to sort of keep your North Star of like what it is that you're trying to do and be flexible enough, but can't be a completely different researcher or different topic for everyone. So sometimes we have to say no, that it doesn't really fit. What do you think, Fer?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's been times where I've expanded my research program in ways that, I didn't feel in my heart, and I've sort of regretted that. And again, I agree with Maria, as you get bigger and bring on more faculty you can mentor, even if doing something isn't in my heart, hopefully I have someone who has. But I also think that as you get older in your group and in career, to some extent you have to expand your research focus. So, Ryan Nipp, one of my mentees, loves to tell people when he came to meet with me and he said he wanted to do geriatrics. I was like, really? Can you do anything but geriatrics? But he has convinced me, and now I'm like all into geriatrics and learning about it. So I think, you have to grow and expand. You just have to make sure that you do it in a way that you feel comfortable and invested in.
Thank you. Any tips on building teams before someone lands the big grant? How do you sustain an all-volunteer team to aim for the bigger goals?
So I think that it's really important to allow people to learn how to have a team and develop a team, even though maybe they don't have all the funding for it. And so, we've been fortunate to have people funded full-time that don't necessarily have 100% full-time work, or they're willing to make room in a research assistant, you know, for between projects, or a project manager to sort of help out and be the, you know, let them try out their teams. I mean, right now, for example, Nick's got a team of, I don't know, he's probably on the call, but he's probably got a team of like 15 folks, you know, that are just sort of in his group and reporting to him. And, you know, he started out with really no money for a team, and just, you know, starting to do small projects and bits and pieces. So, you know, none of us, as I showed you, you know, I started out with him, a visiting faculty member, and someone as a project manager that I had no clue about. And so, you know, little by little, you know, each member, I think, you know, starts to learn some of those leadership skills. What do you think?
I mean, I think the first essential step is just like getting people who are committed and invested in a room together, you know, that, and I think that's the harder part, because once you have a critical mass and you're all working together and you're all committed and you're all invested, I think the funding comes. But I think the barrier is just getting the people together. So I think that's really the first step if you're at a program that doesn't have a pre-established outcomes or palliative care research program and you want to start something yourself, is just try to find a critical mass of like 2 or 3 other people who just want to sit down together. Because after you start to have successes, people are going to come find you. They're going to seek you out and want to work with you.
That's great advice. Are there any programs online that individuals who have come together to form a palliative care research team can train with to help them execute their various roles on the team?
I'm sorry, I just got paged. I missed that. Marie, you have to answer that one.
That's okay. So, yeah, so I've had a couple of people, and one of the things I have my mentees do is visit different teams. And so, for example, I've had an opportunity to spend time in Boston and hang out with Fur and her team and sort of see how they do things. And so, you know, and I'm more senior, but I always encourage my mentees to go experience other people's teams. And I don't know of any formal online training. I think if you have a TS or CTSA, you know, they have a lot of like training to be a research assistant. I think there's even certifications for program management and, you know, that kind of thing. Those things are pretty generic. And so I think that there are opportunities, you know, usually when you start a new grant, especially if it's a larger one, you know, you do have a lot of training that you do, and it feels like you're always doing it because people turn over, blah, blah, blah. There's always somebody new, but I'm not really sure about too much formal stuff.
Okay, I heard enough of Marie's answer to get caught up. So the one suggestion that I would have, so if you're writing a K, either a Career Development Award K or a mid-career K, like a K-24, that's a great opportunity to do quote unquote site visits. So when I got my K-24, at that point, I didn't know that many people in the field, again, just sort of being somewhat of an outsider as an oncologist. And so I just kind of randomly emailed James Tulsky and Randy Curtis. And I said, hey, as part of my K, can I spend 3 days with you? And again, I had never met either of them at the time. And they both said yes. And the 3 days I spent at Duke, I met Kath. And the 3 days I spent in Seattle was amazing. And I got to make new relationships with people who I didn't know before. So I think doing that is really helpful. Obviously with the K, it gives you funding. But, you know, if you're ever in Birmingham and you email Marie and said, I'd like to spend 2 days with your team, I'm sure the answer will be yes. And we do the same thing. So I think it's a really good strategy.
Thank you. Did you ever start a project without a manager, and how did you deal with that?
I think I've only had a project manager in the last 3 years. And in fact, again, a few people have probably heard this story. Sort of my biggest study and paper, I did not have a research coordinator. I was literally collecting the PROs and entering the data into the database myself. So I'm not suggesting that you try to build a big research program without a clinical research coordinator or a project manager. But I was a very long time without a research coordinator. I've only had project managers for about 3 years. So it is definitely possible.
Yeah, one of my postdocs is a project manager and was out, I said some people will do anything to get out of a thing. She was in the ICU for 40 days on ECMO, and she was so organized that even so, we were able to keep the project and the recruitment and everything going. I don't ever want to have that experience ever again. And so I think that it's really important to, to have those kind of people. And that's one of the things that the mentees and the other junior folks on the team is to learn how to, kind of work with another team member and not be doing it all yourself. Because I'm sure that, you were like ripping your hair out, being a one-person show. And, it's just, you just really have to be able to rely on other people for those handoffs. And, I've been burned too. I mean, I've had some issues with project managers who I thought were doing things that they weren't doing. And, then you just kick yourself and say, well, I should just do it all myself, which it's not possible. So, I think that having those regular meetings and that accountability and really kind of staying in touch with what's going on with all parts of the project as much as possible, kind of avoids having those nightmare issues. Yeah.
Thank you. I see another great question. How do you choose team members successfully? What qualities do you look for? And when would it be a good time to part ways if dynamics just don't work well?
That's such a good question. For us, for our research coordinators, we invest hours and hours and hours because, again, we really have our research coordinators run a large part of our studies. They enroll patients, they collect the data. So we have like 10 individuals on our team review every single CV. We then do phone screens and our interviews. I interview every single research coordinator coming into core, whether they're working with me or not. That's like a huge pain in the butt and a time sink, but it is worth it because, again, like having the research coordinators have the same, mindset about being very invested in the work and being committed is so important. And all the time, that's a big mistake I see people make. Like they get a CV and they're like, oh, this person went to like Harvard, whatever, and they hire them. But you really have to think so carefully about who you hire for your research coordinators and your project managers.
Ditto.
Excellent. Do you all have additional suggestions for books, podcasts, articles that help folks develop confidence in their leadership skills? I feel like I'm overly collaborative, which at times is definitely a strength, but I feel like I've gotten myself into a situation where I get walked over. This talk was so validating.
I'm definitely more of like a People magazine kind of girl than reading books about leadership. But what I can tell you, what we are doing is in that little mid-senior career group where I meet with like Vicki Jackson and Joe Greer, like the 5 of us, we don't say yes or no to something till we run it by that group if we're feeling uncertain. So when you're asked to do something that you're like, I really don't know if this is worth the effort, I want to bring it on, you bring it to that group. I have come to that group several times in the last month. I can give you examples. I know Nate's on, but Nate asked me to write a book chapter, and book chapters are hard. They're really time consuming. And I was like, do I do this? Yes or no? I went to the group. I was just asked to chair an ASCO committee, and chairing ASCO, for those of you who aren't in oncology, American Society of Clinical Oncology, those are like a big deal, but it was coming at a terrible time. It's COVID. My research program's a mess. And I was like, oh, do I have to do this? And I went to the team and they were like, yeah, you have to do that. So I think it's helpful to have people to like help you figure out what's important or not.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And I think that if, you know, a glass of wine with an outside individual where you're free to have non-PG conversations has always been helpful. You know, Fer and I've had quite a few of those, and other members of the team. And so I don't feel like, I mean, I think we have a good relationship, and in a way we're sort of a team in different areas. I don't worry about, you know, people stealing ideas. I don't worry about, you know, I mean, it just comes down to total trust. And if you can't trust somebody with those kinds of thoughts, then, or, you know, your ideas or for advice, don't talk to them. Don't put them on your team. You know, you have to have that ultimate trust. I remember when I was analyzing my data from one of my first studies, and I sat down with Fer and I'm like, this isn't coming out right. Like, I'm sharing with her that this study isn't coming out right. And like, what do I do, or how do I handle this? And I learned so much about, you know, things don't always look right at first, and, you know, how to portray them, how, you know, things like that. It was just really incredible. But, you know, it was a lot of trust to go and to tell somebody, you know, in your field, hey, look, you know, this looks screwed up. You know, how do I deal with it? Have you ever had that experience? And we've all had that experience where you feel like a failure. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Temel, was there a point in your career when you did say no to people seeking to involve you in projects or get your help with something or talk to their student? Your message about always saying yes is so different from what we junior faculty often hear from our mentors, and particularly now at a time when many of our time is very scarce. I can see how always saying yes could divert your focus away from getting your next grant, etc. It seems hard to balance.
Yeah, so I would say, I hope my message wasn't that you always say yes. I think there's things that you should always say yes to. So again, I spent 3 days at Duke with James and 3 days in Seattle with Randy. So when James and Randy ask me to do something, the answer is yes. But that doesn't mean you say yes to everything. So, you know, again, as I've gotten more senior and mentoring more junior faculty, like I can't mentor medical students and residents anymore. So my answer is always no, but I send them off to one of my junior faculty who can. You know, so yes, I think you definitely can say no. We just want to be thoughtful about our community. And I think for manuscripts, you can't say yes to every manuscript review. No one can, but if you can do it, do it. But it's really more importantly study section. Marie and I hear all the time from NIH, from ASCO, from all of these organizations that they can't staff their study sections with enough people to review our type of research. And I just think you have to remember that that hurts all of us. So don't say no, don't say yes to everything. Just be thoughtful about what you say no to.
Great. I do want to be mindful of time. We've hit the top of the hour. Do you see the final slide?
We do.
Wonderful. So I do want to thank you both, Dr. Bakitas, Dr. Temel, for joining us today. I also want to thank all of our attendees. And if you do go to our website, we have one more webinar posted for the future. Next up, we have Dr. Ronit Elk to discuss the critical role of understanding and respecting culture in palliative and end-of-life care, thinking about our African-American patients. We hope that you join us for that as well. We'll also be sending out an evaluation where we gather other topics. And so we please ask you to take a minute to fill that out. I see there's a couple questions left in the chat that we didn't get to. Dr. Bakitas and Dr. Temel, if it's okay with you, I'll send those your way and I'll circulate them with the group. Again, thank you so much all. Take care now.
Bye, see you later.